Alright, welcome back everybody. My name is Dustin, and in the last video, we created the grid system that you see here, and we also did some refactoring of how we do our rendering and move most of our rendering code out of the application.cpp and into each display itself to handle on its own. So each display now will handle its own rendering rather than it all just being in the render function in application.cpp. So in this video, we are going to create the asset display. The asset display will render all of the current assets that we have loaded in the game. Now we would use this to aid in changing scenes. So eventually, like say it's here, we're going to want to grab it and drag it in and it'll change the scene for us. So eventually we're going to have like characters and stuff, and you're going to want to grab your texture asset and drag it into the character or the entity that you want to have that texture rather than having to type it in or whatever. You'll just be able to drag it in. So drop it, drag and drop functionality, we're going to be adding that as well. So the asset display is necessary. And again, the asset display is different than the content display. Content display will show us what's in our current game directory, where the asset display is all the files that have been converted into assets that are usable in the engine itself or the editor. And with doing this today, we're also going to set it up so we can change the asset's name or delete the asset if we want to. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to want to do right now is create a new display file. So let's close this all down. Right here in our displays, let's create a new display, new file, and it's going to be the asset display, not display, display.h. Enter. Yes, we want to add that to our CMake file. And let's open up another display. The last one, tile map display, let's open that up. And you know what? We're just going to copy everything here. We might not need everything here, but we're going to just copy it all. So Control A, Control C, bring that over and paste it in. Cool. All right. So let's make some changes here. Let's get rid of all this. We're not going to need this forward declaration. We're not going to need this camera. Change this to the asset display. Asset display. Change this as well. Cool. And we're going to need to override both the draw and update functions. We're not going to need the render tile map, but we are going to need some other private functions, so we'll leave that there. So right now, let's add in our private member variables. If you remember from the tile set display, we have a combo box, ImGui combo box, which is a drop down that allows us to choose which tile set that we're currently using at the moment. Well, we're going to want the same thing with the asset display. And we're only going to have so many different styles of assets. And what we want is a drop down box that will give us which assets to display right now. Let's make a vector of strings. This vector is going to hold the different asset types that we're going to have. And you can just add to this list later if necessary. So we're going to say const std vector, and it's going to be std string, because we're going to use this as the names in our drop-down box. And we're going to say m selectable types. And it's going to be, we'll just do all caps for this. Textures, we're going to have fonts, we're going to have music, we're going to have sound effects because they are different, sound FX, and right now we're only going to have these 5, and we're going to have scenes. Now we don't have anything, we don't have scenes yet. We'll get into that in the next video. We'll start our scene manager and our scene hierarchy, but we'll start with this for now. So now that we have that, we're going to have to create a few different flags here. So we're going to want to know, are we currently hovering the item? So we'll say bool MB item hovered. And we're also going to need to know if the asset type, this type here, the selectable type, has changed. So if we're on this textures, if we change to fonts, I want to know that so we can change what we're looking at. Okay. MB asset type changed. And then we're also going to want to be able to rename the assets. So say you have an asset and it's in a map and we want to change the name of it. You want to do a rename. But you also have to change the name in the map. So you have to change the key name. So we'll get into that as well. So we're going to have a flag here for MB rename. Cool. Okay. So we're also going to have, I'm going to want to be, so our tiles are going to be a certain size. So each asset is going to be basically a little tile in a table or a cell in a table. And I'm going to want to be able to change the size of that particular tile. And we're going to want to have a min value and a max value. We're going to want to be able to clamp it. So I'm going to say, first, I only want to do it if we're over the window and that window is selected. Okay. Bool MB window selected and MB window hovered. Okay. And with that, we're also going to want to have a asset size. So we're going to say float m asset size. Now our size is only going to be a square. So even though it's going to be an ImVec2, I'm just going to use the same asset size for each. And we're also going to have some string member variables. One is going to be for the selected asset name. What's the current selected asset name? Then we're also going to want to have one for the selected type, the current selected type. We're going to have another member variable for the current drag source. So what is the source that we're dragging right now? And then we're also going to have one more string for the rename buff. And that's the buffer for when we're doing a rename with the ImGui input text. And we'll go over that as we need them. I'm just going to add them in now. std string. And it's going to be ms selected asset name. ms selected type, ms drag source, and ms rename buffer. Cool. And just like our tile set, we're going to want to have a selected. So which one is currently selected? So we can say int m selected id. Cool. All right. So now we can go about making the asset display.cpp file. So let's do that right now. Go to our displays, add new file, asset display.cpp. Yes, we're going to want to apply that to our CMake list. And then we're going to say include asset display.h. Then it's namespace, Scion editor. Cool. Now we should be able to go to here. We can close asset display now, or tilemat display. We can close that now. We should be able to make these. I'm not sure why that's erroring out. We're just waiting for the CMake to finish. That should be fine. So let's try to make this, and it should make it in asset display.cpp. And it did. But it didn't make it inside of our namespace. I was hoping it would. Oh, that's because you guys already saw that probably. There we go. Silly me. So asset display, that's our constructor. Cool. Let's go back to the asset display and let's make these two override functions as well. Awesome. And let's initialize our member variables. So we just want to do them in order. So all of these here, we can just actually just copy all this. Go here, place that in, and just start erasing some stuff. Cool. And these are all going to be false for now, just default. Cool. And selected type, we don't want that to be false. Just an empty string. Copy that. Selected type for now can also be an empty string. Drag drop source, we'll leave that empty for now. And the rename buff can be empty for now. And the asset size, we're going to make something for this. And the selected ID, we want just -1. So for the asset size, we're going to have a few default values, and we're going to do those up at the top here. We're going to have some const expr values. So up here, let's say, right here, let's say const expr float, and it's going to be default asset size. And we're going to default to 128.f. And then we're going to have another const expr. Whoops, I thought I put a semicolon there. Don't forget that. So const expr. And it's going to be ImVec2. So I'm going to need to include ImGui here. So include ImGui. Cool. And this is going to be our drag size. So how big is the tile going to be when we drag it around? So if I want to drag a texture into an entity sprite component slot, how big is that going to be? And it's going to be 32 by 32. So I'm going to say drag asset size is equal to imvec2 32.f by 32.f. Cool. And we can place that in here. So let's take our default asset size and paste that right in there. Perfect. So that's all that for now. Okay, so what are we also going to need? We're going to need an enum for the asset type, okay? Because we're going to have to make some changes to our asset manager, and we're also going to have to make some other changes as well. So let's make an enum type for the asset, and we'll put that in our Scion utilities so it's accessible everywhere. So let's go to our Scion utilities. Down here, what do we have so far? So we have our Scion utilities, wrapper, Scion utilities. Yeah, right in Scion utilities.h. We'll just put it in here. And up here, we'll just put it at the top. We'll have an enum class. So enum class, and it's going to be the asset, let's say asset type. And we're going to have texture. We're going to have font, sound effects, music, scene, and then we'll just put no type for now. That'll be our max value. Cool. So now that we have our enum class for our asset type, let's add that in our asset display here, and we're going to want to add that in as a member variable, and it's going to be the selected type. And we can just put that at the, let's put it right here. So it's going to be Scion util asset type me selected type. Cool. And this, we can forward declare this up here. So we can say namespace Scion util, and inside of this we're going to say enum class asset type. Cool. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go into our asset display.cpp and let's include the new Scion utilities. So include Scion utilities. And where do we put that? We put that right above asset size. Copy this. And we're going to want to default to, let's say we default to texture. So we can say Scion util asset type texture. Cool. Okay, so let's go into our draw function and start making a display. So we're going to say remember, a lot of this stuff is going to change as we add in more features, so we can, if we're showing these windows and stuff like that. So, but right now this is how we're going to do it. So ImGui begin, and it's just going to say assets. That's ImGui with a capital G. Cool. And then we're say ImGui end. Copy this, return. Cool. And just like always, we're going to want to get the main registry, so auto reference. Well, not always, but for now, main registry. And we won't be able to get that unless we have that included. So main registry. Let's go up to the top. And let's add a couple more includes that I know we're going to need. So include, that's core ECS, main registry. And we have our Scion utilities already. We're going to need our logger. So include logger. You know what? We're also going to need our input manager. So let's include that. So include, I don't remember where that is. Where did we put the input manager? Scion core, scripting. It's in scripting. Okay. So it'll be core, scripting, and I want the input manager. Cool. We're going to need that when we're scrolling to increase or decrease the size of the tile or the cell for the asset. And we're also going to need the asset manager. Okay, let's actually move this here. And let's include the asset manager. So include core resources asset manager dot h. I believe that's correct. All right. So let's go back into the draw function. So I'll get our main registry and get our asset manager. So auto reference asset manager is equal to main registry dot get asset manager. Awesome. Then we're going to have our ImGui text, and we're going to say the asset type. This is going to be the name for our drop-down box. And it's going to be ImGui, same line. Then we're going to say 0.f, and then also a little bit of spacing. Let's go 10.f. Now I want to start my combo box. So if I go if ImGui begin combo, and we're going to say hashtag asset type. Now what this is doing is it won't have the name for it. That's why we're doing the text here. So the name is on the left and the combo box is on the right. So it starts with the name, same line, then make the combo box, and then the combo box has no name because it's on the left. And if we did it the other way around, if I put this here, the name would be on the right, and I don't want that in this particular situation. So then I want to say, so this is the const.char preview value, and the preview value is going to be our currently selected type. So we're going to say ms selected type, and it takes a C string. Cool. And let's go into the combo box. I want to say ImGui and combo. Cool. And it's going to be similar to the other one there. Well, where was that? That's in our tile set. So let's go to our tile set display. Close this down. Displays. Tile set display.cpp, and it's going to be basically the same as this. We can actually copy the whole for loop. Yeah, that's what we want. And go back into our asset display, and here, go down, paste this in, and just change these. It's not the asset manager gets tile set names anymore. Now it's just going to be our selectable types. Okay, so it's going to be ms selectable types. Selectable types. So it's just M selectable types, not MS, sorry. And this is going to be the S asset type. Cool. B selected is going to be M S selected type. So is the current selected type equal to the current asset type. Right? Copy this. And we're going to have a bit more to do in here, but that is all the same. So in here, we want to set if it has changed or not. So we want to say MB asset type changed is equal to true. MS selected type is equal to the S asset type. Then we're going to want to say MS selected, not MS, M selected ID is back to equal to -1. So we basically wanted to reset once you change. Sorry. Because say you have 100 things and it's on like 68 or 69. You don't want it to be at 69 if you switch over to the next and there is only 4 or whatever, right? So the ID won't make sense. So just put it back to -1. And then we're going to have another function here, and we're going to have a function that's going to be called set asset type. Cool. Let's actually go make that now. Here, that's just going to be a private function, and it's just going to be void set asset type. So let's start that. Okay, so in set asset type, all we're doing here is going through and to see what the current selected type is, and we're setting those values based on whatever it is, if that makes sense. So I want to say, first let's check to see if the asset type has even changed. So MB asset type changed. So if not, let's just return. I don't care, I don't need to be in there if not. So then we say if MS selected type is equal to textures. If it's equal to textures, or let's copy this, else copy this. So fonts, sound effects, music, or scenes. So we'll change this stuff here. Not scenes, sorry. Fonts, sound, FX, music, or scenes. We may have to add more in the future. Else, if we do get here, this is going to be setting it to no asset type. So up here, let's say ME selected type is equal to Scion2D asset type texture. Right? And we need to do the same thing, but now we also need to do the drag source. So what is our current drag source? We actually want to do that in here as well. So ms drag source is equal to, we don't have anything for these yet, what it's going to be. So we can actually create some const expr values for this. So if we go back to our Scion utilities, we can add a few things in here in our Scion utilities. Or actually, you know what? So, because we won't be doing drag drop stuff outside of the editor. So let's actually just make that in the editors. Do we have a utilities file for the editor? Not really. So let's actually create an editor utilities, and we'll do that here. So new file, editor utilities.h. Yep, we want to add that in. And we're going to want to say pragma once. And actually, we have to make sure that we did that here as well. Yep, we already did because I copied from other stuff. So pragma once, and this is just going to be namespace Scion editor. Now let's add some const expr values. So we can say const expr const char pointer drop texture source, and that's just going to be drop texture source. Cool. Let's make a few of these. So font, sound, music, scene. Change it. Font, sound, FX. Let's put sound effects. Music. And the scene. Change these as well. And the last ones are fonts. And you know what? While we're here, we might as well make the idea of a canvas as well. And that will be part of the editor utilities. So we'll say struct canvas. And that's just going to be an int width. And that's just default at 640. And then height 480. Tile width. And this will just default to 16. And tile height also to 16. Now we can change this later as we need it, but the idea is now there and it's in our editor utilities. Okay, so let's go back into our asset display and start making these. Okay, cool. So we can put this here, but we need to go std string. Cool. Let's add in our editor utility. So that will be include editor utilities, editor utilities. Cool, there we go. And let's just copy all of this and put it into all 5 of these. And we'll put it here as well. Cool. So our texture is a texture, and then we'll go through and make all these changes. So fonts, font, sound effects, sound effects, music, and our scenes. Now I put scenes here. We got to make sure that that's real. It is. Cool. Cool. Scene. And by default here, if it's none of these, we just want to set it to no type. No type. And this can be no asset type. No asset type. We don't have to do the string conversion here. Cool. And we can say MB asset type changed. Now that we have this function here, our set asset type, let's go down to our constructor really quick. Right here, asset change, we want this true on the beginning, and then right here we can say set asset type. Cool. So when this is first constructed, it'll go through and set the asset type based on the texture, and it'll do all that stuff for us. Awesome. Okay, so now that we have our combo box, and we can come out of that and the combo box, and here I want to create another child, so I want to go if ImGui begin child, and it's just going to be the asset table, and it's going to all be empty basically. I am vec2 0.f 0.f. I need to add these flags in, so this one is going to be child flags. Let's say null, and then I'm going to have ImGui window flags, always vertical scroll bar, and I also want to have ImGui window flags child window. Cool. And then this is where I'm going to want to set the focused or hovered for my windows. So I want to say MB window hovered is equal to ImGui is window hovered. And we want to see MB is the window selected, or you could say window focused, but because that's what the ImGui name is window focused. Cool. And right here we can say ImGui and child. And I also want to add in one more function here, and this is going to be the draw selected assets function. This is the one that's going to be the meat and potatoes that does all the work. Okay, so draw selected assets. So we're going to go make this now. So let's copy this. Asset display, that's another private function, void draw selected assets. So let's make this one as well. So with drawing the selected assets, this is going to be basically a table, and we're going to go and grab the assets based on its type from the asset manager and draw those types. So I'm going to want to get the asset manager again, and we're doing that right here, so we can just grab this here. We may need the main registry, so I might as well add that in. So what I want to do is have a vector of the current asset names. So we want to go std vector. I want to say std string, and it's going to be asset names. Okay, and then here we're going to say if me selected type is equal to Scion2D asset type scene. Then we're going to want to do something here. So this is to do when we have the scene manager. We don't have that right now, so we're just going to do this, and then we're going to say else. Then we're going to say asset names is equal to asset manager dot. Now we want to get asset key names. See this here? We don't have that. So get asset key names. And it's going to take in the type. So we want to go M E selected type. Okay, so what we want to do is get the asset names or the asset key names for this particular type, so this utility type. Okay, so let's go into our asset manager and make that now. We can just copy this function, go to the asset manager.h. So here in core resources asset manager, well, we need CPP, so we might as well open it. Core resources asset manager.h. Okay, and we're going to need a new function. We'll just put these at the bottom. So down here, and this is going to return an std vector of std string, and it's going to take in the Scion2D asset type asset type. So we're going to need to forward declare this up at the top. Whoops. Bring this down. Namespace, boost. I did it again. Space. Enum class asset type. Cool. Go back to the bottom. Eventually these errors should go away. And we're going to want to generate this. This could probably be const here as well, but let's just copy this. Go to asset manager.cpp, go down to the bottom here, above this. Asset manager. Cool. Okay, so this one's pretty straightforward. We're just going to have a switch statement that will go through, it will loop through all of our types, our asset types, and then return the keys from that. So up at the top, no, I think we're already including that, so that's fine. We can go, so switch, e asset type. Here we can go case, Scion, util, asset type, texture, font, sound effects, music, font, sound effects, music. And if it gets here, we want to assert cannot get this type. We'll just say that. Cool. And here, we're going to want to return our keys. And we can do that using our utility function that we created. So we can go return Scion util get keys. And for the textures, I want to say map or m map textures. I'm going to say auto reference pair, and we can actually say const here. Then I want to return not pair dot second is editor texture. So I do not want to return it if it's an editor texture. Okay. Now let's make sure that's what we called the getter function inside of textures. Doesn't look like it's angry, so but let's check anyway. So down here, textures, that's in the essentials. And is editor texture. Yep, so that's good. Go back into our asset manager.cpp, just paste that in, make sure that's it. Cool. Now the other ones don't need to have the predicate, but we can still add this in. So we'll just do this, 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 and just change we can get rid of all of that. This can be map font, map sound FX. Yeah, cool. And map music. Cool. And if it gets past this, we'll just return an empty table. Yep, so this can be const, so let's change that and go back to here, change it to const here. Awesome. Okay, so let's go back into our asset display.cpp, and first thing I want to do here is actually just check to see if it's empty. So let's go asset names.empty, empty, and if it's empty, we just want to return. So let's say if, sorry, I should do that first. So if is empty, just return. No need to continue. And we can clean this up a little. Leave that like that for now. Cool. So now I need to get the number of columns and the number of rows that I want to use for the particular assets, right? So we have our assets, how many columns, how many rows for our table, okay? And to do that, I'm going to need to get the window width. That's the current window width of the window itself. So let's go const auto reference window width is equal to ImGui get window width. Cool. And that returns a float. So actually I don't even need that const auto. We can just say float here. Cool. Then I can say int num columns is equal to static cast int window width minus ms asset size, not ms, m asset size, sorry, divided by m asset size. Okay, we can do num rows, so we can go int num rows is equal to static cast int, and I want to say asset names dot size, so how many assets we have, divided by the number of calls. If it's less than or equal to 1, I want to make it 1, else num calls and plus 1. So our number of rows is always going to be at least 1. And then we say if not num calls or not num rows, so if they're equal to 0, return. All right. Now, this is where all the magic's going to happen. We're going to do a lot of work in this table, okay? So just like in the tile set display, I believe we have that right here. We're going to need a table, and we do that here, and we're going to want these exact same flags, all this stuff. We can copy all of this. You know what, let's just copy the whole table and just delete stuff out of it. So copy this, bring that over to our asset display, and we can just paste that right here, and let's get rid of everything we're not going to use. We can leave the ID, we're probably going to need that. Actually, you know what, we'll add that if we need it. Let's just delete everything on the inside. All the internals we'll delete. Okay. And yep, we're going to need the K and the ID, and we're going to change this just to assets, and it's going to be num calls, and our table flags. We're not going to really need to scroll X, but we do want fixed size. We could probably change this to rows here. So for the first row in num rows and first call in num calls. Yeah, so let's say row in row num rows, row plus plus, and we'll do the same for the columns. So call num calls, call plus plus, call. Cool. All right. So another thing we're going to need to do is right here at the top, I'm going to want to get an iterator to the beginning of my assets. Okay. So I want to say auto asset iter is equal to asset names dot begin. So we're getting an iterator to the beginning of the assets. Okay. And then I'm going to want to go down here, and inside of here, I'm going to want to say if asset iter is equal to asset names dot end. I'm just going to want to break. I want to leave here. We're going to need this. It's just going to be a string, but it's pointing at the vector. So we're iterating through the vector. Okay. And I don't want that there. I actually want that in my columns. Sorry. I want nothing here except for the table next row. I want this right here. And then right now I'm going to want to push my ID. So I'm going to go ImGui. I want to say push ID, and we're going to say K++. So what it does is it pushes K as the ID and then adds 1 to it as soon as it pushes it. So right after it adds that K. And this is needed for any buttons that we're going to do, because we're going to be using image buttons again. So you want to be able to set the ID to it so it knows which ID you're pointing at. And let's create a little flag so we know which one's selected. We can say bool B selected asset, and that's going to be M selected ID is equal to the current ID. Okay. Hopefully that's making sense right now. So we have a table and we're looping through all the rows of our assets that we're going through, and we're going to be making buttons for that. Okay. So right now we also want to set the cell color same way as over here. We want to set the cell this exactly the same way. So we can actually just copy this here and go back to our asset display, paste that in, and we don't need this anymore because we have the B selected. Then we want to change the asset color if it is selected. Okay, cool. So now we actually want to get the texture ID. Now this one's going to be a little bit different because not everything has a texture, right? So we need to, well, fonts are textures. So fonts, we can use their texture ID. Textures have their own texture ID. However, we're going to need to have more texture IDs for our music assets or our scenes and stuff like that. So we're going to have to create another function. So we'll go GL uint texture ID, and that's going to be get texture ID, and that's going to take in the current asset iterator. So now we need to go and make this function here. So it's going to return an unsigned int, because that's all GL uint is a type def for unsigned int. Okay, so we can just copy this. We can just copy the asset editor as well, so we remember. Let's go into our asset display.h here, and we can create a unsigned int. That's going to take in a const std string reference as asset name. Visual Studio is acting all bonkers right now. Cool. And now we're going to want to fill this out. So with this one, we're just going to want to loop through the types, and we're going to want to send back the particular ID. Okay. So we'll leave this return 0 there, and we can say switch based on the current ME selected type. We're going to want to say case, Scion, util, asset type, texture, fonts, music, sound effects, and scene. Scene, music, sound effects, and font. So music and sound effects can be the same. So we can have fall through there. Font, texture, and the scene. Cool. And I'm going to need the asset manager. So we're going to want to go auto reference asset manager is equal to main registry dot get asset manager. Cool. And once we have the asset manager, we can get the texture and return the ID. So we want to go auto p texture is equal to asset manager dot get texture based on the asset name. And if p texture, so if p texture, we want to return p texture get ID. Cool. Same with fonts. We can basically copy this. It's going to be similar. And it's going to be get font. And it's going to be p font. And we want to return p font. And this one's get font atlas, I believe it is. Get font atlas. Oops. Okay, and so for the sound effects or the music, we're going to want to actually get a texture here. So let's copy this, get texture, and these are both going to be music icons, okay? So up here, and we're going to want to say music icon. Now these are going to be added in from memory. We're going to add these textures in, and we're going to do the same thing for the scenes and add those in as scene icon. Scene icon. Cool. And we're going to have to add those in. All right. Else we'll just return 0 for the texture ID. So let's check where we get texture ID. Here. Let's get rid of that. So let's check to see. So if texture ID is equal to 0, just return. We don't need to keep going because we have no texture to draw. So now we're going to want to do our image button. So ImGui image button, and it's going to be IM texture ID, texture ID, and we want IM vec2, and this is M asset size, M asset size. Cool. So now we should have our button drawn, but we can't do anything with it yet. Let's actually see if this is working the way we want. So let's try to build this right now. I think we're not missing anything. Before we build, let's actually go and add this into our application. So let's go to application.h, not h.cpp. Go down to our displays, add in a new display. We'll call this the asset display. Move to create displays. And let's add this in. So we'll just go to the bottom, tile map display. We'll just copy all of that. Paste. Change this to asset display. Fail to create the asset display. Cool. Then we can add in our P asset display. Cool. And let's see if this is made. And we're just going to dock this as well. Where do I do that? I think it's in the render ImGui function. And we'll just dock that also on the center node. So we'll just copy this down, and I believe we just called it assets. But let's go and verify that. Get rid of that. Go to our asset display. And where's our window? It's our table. Where's our window? Window. Yeah, we just called it assets. So this should run. So let's run it and see what happens. So it looks like we have some errors here that we're missing. 161. Let's go to that. That's not a real error. Build failed. So where are we actually missing that? Yeah. So I must have erased something accidentally. There we go. You guys probably caught that already as well. Yeah, so that error was correct. There was an error here. That's another thing you guys probably saw as well. Sorry about that. Trying to get a lot done in a short amount of time. You make mistakes. Sorry, that's supposed to be equals, not is equal. Run it again. The compiler is so smart compared to us. Awesome. So it went up here. So our assets, I actually don't want it there. I actually want it down here. And here's our types. Cool. And they're all play buttons for some reason. So it's not working exactly how I want it to work. But that's okay. We're at least showing something. We're showing play buttons here. If I go to fonts. So the fonts are working. Awesome. So it shouldn't even have the play button there. I must have made a mistake. Let's go back. Probably in here. Return not is editor texture. Let's go to our texture, editor texture. Texture.cpp. Did we set that to false? We did. So it shouldn't just be returning that play button. Let's run again real fast. I know I made no changes, but so textures, yeah, they're all play buttons. Interesting. So it's not working the way that I want, which is fine. Now we have to figure out why. So let's go into our draw textures. So calls, rows, assets, asset names. Stop. Oh my lord. That's why. Interesting. I like it. Okay, so get asset names is returning billions. Returns a vector of strings here. Get keys, map texture. Let's just run it and pause there. Okay, so our textures, we have two right now. Play button and stop button. So it shouldn't return anything, actually. But it did. What the heck? Cool. So that's returning a bunch of stuff that I haven't seen it do before. So we're gonna have to make some changes. Let's go back into our get keys function. Maybe I'm doing something wrong here. No, that looks right. I don't think that would have anything to do with it. That's doing some crazy stuff right there. Totally incorrect. So we have 0 asset names going in. Oh, so we're going to have to go into debug because this is doing some weird stuff that I'm confused about. So yeah, we're returning an empty this here. So we can run this stuff in debug for now because it doesn't really matter. Like what we're doing right now is not as important for speed. All right, so our selected type, no type, which it shouldn't have been no type because we defaulted. So this needs breaks. So if the return doesn't work, we need to add breaks. That's one thing. So yeah, it should be defaulting to texture. So the issue is probably actually because we're not, so we're defaulting it to texture, but our selected type is not defaulting. So when we call it here, when we call it, where's our constructor? So when we call selected type here, our actual selected type was nothing. So when it came in here, it had nothing, so it was setting it here, and that's why it was all messed up. Well, that's part of the reason why. So let's run it and see if that fixes our issue. Cool, so here, and let's just run it to that one. And size 2. So play button and stop button, these are editor textures, right? So we don't actually want to show these. This should have been filtered. I'm not sure why they were not. Probably because we didn't set those. So when let's go to our application.cpp and where we're loading those textures. So that is create texture from memory, I believe. Or create from memory. No? Where are we loading our editor textures? Yeah, right here. So we're loading our editor textures and we need to get that texture and set it. Okay, so we need to go let's just say asset manager dot get texture. That's going to be the play button. And once we get it, we want to set is editor texture. True. Copy this. True. And this is the stop button. So the filter is actually working. So if we go to our asset manager, this can stay const. So the filter was working, but we weren't actually setting that texture as an editor texture. That is something that we need to do manually. So these are editor textures here. Yeah, so we're loading our editor textures. And we're going to have 2 more editor textures that we need to add in as well. So in our asset display, when we go get texture ID right here, we're going to have 2 more texture ID. We're going to have 2 more, and they're going to be the music icon and the scene icon. And while we're here, we can just say break. Because we don't want it to fall through. So if the return doesn't work, we want to break. 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 And also break. Break. Cool. And if it gets here, return. All right. So we need to add these in. So we might as well do that right now before I forget. Okay, so it's the music icon and the scene icon. So let's go back here and let's just copy this here. Copy, paste, and we'll change this. And this is going to be the music icon. And this is going to be music icon. These don't exist yet. We need to add these in. Not icon. Icon. Let's put this in here. Music icon. Music icon. Music icon. Music icon. And we'll copy this again. And paste. and change this to scene icon. Cool. And now we have to go and create these. Now these are basically these files that I made for the music icon and the scene icon. And then I just extracted the data like we did previously for the play button and the stop button. So I'm just going to add those in now. So I got this scene icon. So let's go to here where we're doing the stop button. Let's go down to the bottom. Add the scene icon in. Now this one seems to be humongous compared to what it should be, but that's all right. So you have our scene icon, and this one actually has the size, so 7,000, that's huge, but that's okay. We can always change that later if necessary. And let's get the music icon, which is much smaller. We probably don't even need this for now, but we'll leave it. Let's go to the bottom, put the music icon in. Cool. Now we have both of those. Both of those are in. You'll get these from grab this from the GitHub repo. I usually post everything to the GitHub repo as soon as I've done posting the video. So if you need to go grab it, go grab it. And if you're on a different video than the one compared to where it already is updated, just check the commits for the dates and match the date to the video, and it should be the same. It'll also be some type of a hint in the commit comment to what we did, and then go off of that commit for the video. So if you're on this video, go off of this commit. Don't necessarily go off the master because it might be ahead. Okay, so both those are in. Cool. Let's go back to our application.cpp. And we got our buttons, scene icon, cool. And let's run it and see what we get. All right, so assets, textures, we have no textures. And we broke something. Cool, let's see what we broke. And we have a error. So let's see our call stack. Draw selected assets, so end table. This should not be in the for loop. And you guys, if you use ImGui, you probably caught that already. That should be outside of the for loop here. Cool. So let's just stop debugging and run it again. And let's go to our assets, change it to fonts. It's still broke. Let's see what I did wrong again. Retry. Oh, because I'm trying to do too many things at once, I probably, yeah. So we pushed an ID here and we never ended up popping it off. And we never changed anything either. So right here, we need to go ++ ID, ++ asset iter. Then I need to go ImGui pop ID. Let's make sure we get those in. So now we're moving our asset ID. We're moving our asset iter, and we're popping off the ID. Okay, this should run now, but we're unable to. We're not selecting anything yet, but we'll get to that. Let's just see if this is running. So let's stop it and run again. Assets, fonts, yay! So we only have one font by the looks of it, and that's okay. And music, we have nothing, nothing. We have no scenes, right? So if we run this, we should actually get textures. And this still works. It's slow because we're in debug, but that's okay. And go back to our assets, go back to our textures. Awesome. So they're all there the way that we have them in. Great. And there's no editor textures in here. And that's what we want. We wanted to filter them for our editor textures and our music. Now, I don't even know if we're loading any music or sound effects yet. We should actually add something in just for testing, but we'll get to that later. There's lots of other fun stuff that we have to do. Okay, so let's close out of this. We also have, so now that we have our image button, we can actually open this up a bit. I want to actually now set if I'm hovered and our mouse is clicked. So if ImGui is item hovered and ImGui is mouse clicked 0 and not MB rename. So if we're currently renaming something, don't allow us to switch the selected ID. This is what we're doing here. We're setting our selected ID here. m selected ID is equal to the ID. Okay, but don't change it if we're renaming. Don't allow it to do that. Cool. Now let's get the const char version of our asset name. So let's say auto s asset name is equal to the dereferenced asset iter C string. Cool. So there's a few other things we're going to need here. We're going to want to have the ability to open up asset context, and that's the context for each asset, right? So if we go if b selected and ImGui begin pop-up context item, do something in here. And the context item is just a pop-up, so we're going to want to end pop-up if we do open it up. Okay, and right here we're going to have a new function, and that's to do open asset context. Cool. Okay, so that's a check for the context, and we're also going to want to do the drag drop source. So whatever is the selected asset that we're dragging, that's the one we want to do. So we want to go if ImGui begin drag drop source. I want to say ImGui set drag drop payload, and that's going to be the source C string, and we're sending the asset name because it takes the S asset name, and it's going to be string length of the asset name +1 times size of char, then ImGui cond once. So do it one time, right? Set the variable once per runtime session. Only the first call will succeed, okay? Cool. So that's setting our payload. And then I want to set the image that will follow the mouse cursor around. So if we're dragging it, that's going to be the image on the cursor. So ImGui image, texture ID. That's our cast. Okay, I don't need that comment. Then texture ID that we're sending in, and this is the drag asset size. Cool. And then we want to end the drag source. ImGui and drag source. Drag drop source, sorry. Cool. Now I want to have the name of the asset below the tile or below the cell. So I want to draw that in now, and I'm only going to want to draw if I'm not renaming it. Okay, so if I go if not mb rename, then I want to say ImGui text s asset name. Now we want to do the rename capabilities. So we're going to want to use an ImGui input text for that. Okay, so I want to go if we're renaming it mb rename, and it's the selected asset, so b selected asset. Now I want to do my rename. So I want to set my focus, ImGui set keyboard focus here to this particular widget, and I want to say if ImGui input text, and it's going to be rename, and it's going to take in our buffer that we created. This is where we're taking in our buffer. So it's a char buffer and a size t buffer size, and we're going to have a few flags. Okay, and I'm only going to have one flag actually. So what we can do for the buffer, now you can do this with a char array and send that in, but I was able to do it with a string. And what you do with a string is just go ms rename buffer size or rename buffer dot data. You want to send in the data, okay? And I'm just going to have it hard coded as I want it to have 255 as the size maximum. Okay, and then I'm going to have one flag, and it's going to be ImGui input text flag. Enter returns true. Okay, because if you don't put enter returns true, every time that you press a button, it's going to come in here and return true. But as soon as you hit enter, that's when it's coming in here to return true. So here I'm going to want to actually do the rename of the asset. Now, we can't just send it anywhere. We need to create another function here because the rename needs to go to a specific map, rename the key or the node in the map from there. So we need to make a new function for that. So we'll say if not do rename asset, that's going to be the name of it. And it's going to take in two. It's going to take in the current asset. So in our case, it's the asset iter. And it's also going to take in the new name. So, and we're going to have to call that that's going to be the rename buff. But we can't just send it in as data. Since we're doing it like this, we need to actually create another name, another one, and set it from the data. Okay, or it'll just return 0, because right now our size is going to be 0. As soon as we're doing this changes the size of the string to 0. So I'm going to need to make another string for checking the data. So let's actually quickly make this function. And before we do that, let's actually add in that new string I was talking about. Okay, and we'll do that right up here. So we'll just say std string s check name is going to be ms rename buff dot data. Okay, so now we can take this check name, so it's the checked name, and send it in here. Okay, and if that fails, we'll do some error here. So to do some type of error here. So we have to make this function. Obviously it returns a bool and it takes in two different names. So let's go here, asset display, create another function, and it'll say bool, and that's going to take in two const strings. So const, and it's going to be the old name and the new name that we're changing it to. New name. Okay, there's a lot in this video. I might stop and split it up, but there's a lot of things going on here to get this to work the way I want it to do. So we want to make this actually kind of like a real application that you would use in the real world. Now, there's a lot of things I'm not doing in the best way, but we can always make those changes later. The whole point is to get some functionality going and start making those changes as we go. Cool. So let's make this function. Do rename assets. So if the new name is empty, I don't care. I want it to leave. So s new name dot empty. We just want to return false. We're gonna have to check to see if it's a scene. So if me selected type is equal to Scion util asset type scene. So if it's a scene, we're gonna want to do something here. So this will be to do change the scene name, but this will be done in the scene manager, and we don't have that yet, so we'll just leave that like that. And down here, now we want to do our asset manager. So auto reference asset manager is equal to main registry get asset manager. And here I'm going to want to make another function in the asset manager that will handle changing the name. Okay, so we go return asset manager dot change asset name. Okay, and changing the asset name is going to take in the s old name. It's also going to take in the new name, and then it's also going to take in the selected type, so it can filter out which map that it needs to change it from. Okay, so we'll have this change asset name, and it's going to return a bool. And here, if it makes it here, let's just say Scion assert false. So if it gets here, really, how did it get here? So let's just assert that if we're in debug. So how did it get here? And then just return false. Cool. All right, so now we have to make this function here. So let's take this and let's go into our asset display, not asset display, sorry, asset manager, and make another function. So right under get key names, we can just paste that in, and that can be bool change asset name, and it's going to take in a const std string reference. Copy this for the new name, and then we're also going to want to have the type, so we can copy this asset type here and paste that in. Cool. So we can copy this, go to here, and paste this in. This is for the asset manager. And it's going to be something similar to this. So we can just copy all of this here. Paste that in. This can return false. Okay. Now, this is where it's going to be a little bit different. Now we're going to want to make another utility function that will return the key change. Okay. So we can go here as well and do it in here. So this is going to be our new utility function, and we're going to call it key change, okay? And it's going to be template, type name, or class name. It depends on what you like. And I want to say bool key change. And it's going to take in the map, reference, map. It's going to take in, now we want the key and the change. So we want to say const type name, map, key type, reference, key. And then we also want to add this as well for the change. And we'll say change. Let's get rid of this, like that. Cool. So in this function, what we're going to want to do is check to see if it contains the key. So if not map.contains key, we're going to leave. Or if it already contains the change. Does that make sense? So map.contains change. Because if it already contains the change, what we would be doing is writing over it. And we don't want to lose it. So if we change something, so here we just want to return false. Now you could add an error here if you like, but if it already contains the change, we don't want to do that. So we want to leave. Then we could say auto node is equal to map.extract. So we're extracting the node from the map, and we're going to say node.key is equal to change. Then we can say map.insert std move node. And then we can return true. Cool. So once you take the node out of the map, it's now out of the map. You've extracted the node. And you can change the key to that node and then just insert it back into the map. So now that we have this key change function, we can actually go into our asset manager and make the changes accordingly. So let's change this to key change, right? And it takes in map, and we'll get rid of all of this. So the key change takes in the map, it takes in the old name, and it takes in the new name. Cool. And we can just copy this and add this to all of them. So here, and then we'll just change this to fonts. All this here. Change this to sound effects. And then the music. Awesome. So all that's doing here is it's taking in the map, taking the old name or the old key that we're sending in, the new name that we want to change it to based on the asset type, and it's changing those maps accordingly. Okay. And then this returns true or false if needed. So now we have our change asset name. Let's go back to our asset display.cpp. So we have our do name reset. So here, this is just telling me that it can be const. So you can make that change if you want. So we're going to change our asset name, and that's going to return true or false accordingly. So if we have our do rename asset. Cool. So here, if it fails, we can say Scion error. We for now just say failed to change asset name. You could put more there if you like. And I just want to clear the buffer. So ms rename buff clear. And I also want to say mb rename is equal to false. So we're no longer renaming the asset. Also, if we are renaming, if we're doing the rename and we're not doing the input text, but if we hit exit or the escape key, I want to shut everything down, okay? So I want to go else if mb rename and ImGui is key pressed. ImGui get key index. ImGui key escape. Now I'm going to want to rename the buff, or clear the rename buff, sorry. ms rename buff clear, and cancel the mb rename. So that's equal to false now. Okay. Cool. I know we're doing a lot here without really testing it, and it's hard to explain as you go, but this is pretty fun. Now we want to start the rename. If it hasn't been started, if I do a double click on the item, so I want to go if not mb rename, and this is the selected asset, so b selected asset, and the item is hovered, so mb item hovered, and we do a double click. ImGui is mouse double clicked, and which one? Button 0. Okay, so if we get into there, I want to say ms rename buff clear. Then I want to set it to the asset name. ms rename buff is equal to the s asset name, or you could probably just use the asset iter. Cool. So the current asset iter. Then I want to set rename to true. mb rename is equal to true. All right. So we don't want to just set the name to whatever we send in, right? We don't want it to be empty, so the rename buff can't be empty. We don't want to change the name to an empty string. And we also want to make sure that the name doesn't already exist and set a little bit of a warning. And we can do that by checking the name. Okay, so we want to go if mb rename and b selected asset. Now I want to go in here and say if s asset name is not equal to s check rename. S just check name, sorry. And then we can add in a new function, and we'll call this check rename. So this will be, so check the name. So check the rename. Okay, and this is going to take in the check name. So we're changing our name, and they're not the same. Check our rename. Okay, so let's make this function. And what this will do is this will display some error text for us. Okay, and that's what I want. So go here, create this function, void check rename. Also takes in a const string. Cool. So we'll make this function. All right, so we have our check rename. So first thing I want to do now, check to see if the name or the new name is empty. If it's empty, I want to have a little text color error, and I want to say rename text cannot be blank, right? So we can say if s check name is empty. Now we can create a little error here. So ImGui text colored. And we can say ImVec4. And it's 1.f. I want the text to be red, like an error text. 0.f. 0.f. And 1.f. And the text is going to be rename text cannot be blank. Cool. And this just returned because it's currently blank. And now I want to make sure that the text, like the rename text that we're sending, trying to change the asset name, I want to make sure that that name doesn't already exist in that particular map. Okay. So I want to first, the same thing, check for the scene. So if me selected type is equal to Scion2D asset type scene. So if it's the scene, we're going to have to do that later. To do check if scene name already exists. Else, we want to do it in the asset manager. Okay. So let's create a little flag here and say bool b has asset. And this will just be false for now. And we'll go auto reference asset manager is equal to main registry get asset manager. And there we want to say if asset manager dot check has asset. This is also a new function, and we're going to say s check name and the asset type. So e selected type. So if that is true, we want to say b has asset equals true. And then here, if b has asset, now we want to do a new text. So we want to say ImGui. We can actually copy this colored text up here and make a change. Let's copy this. And we're going to say std format dot cstring. And we're going to say inside of here, we're going to say asset name already exists. And that's going to be the asset name that we're changing it to. And that's here. S check name. All right. So now we have to go make this function here. So check has asset, or we could change that to a better name, but what this is going to do, it's going to check the specific asset type, the map there, and see if that exists. Okay. So we can copy that. Go back into our asset manager and create another bool check. And we can just copy all of that. Get rid of the new name. And this is just s name check. Or asset name. It's up to you. Let's create this function. So right here, paste that in. Asset manager. Cool. And it's going to, again, it's going to be something similar to this. We're going to want to return a value, true or false, based on the asset type that we're sending in. Here. And we can get rid of all this key change stuff. All of that. And just say contains s name check. That's it. And just copy all of this. And just change these accordingly. So fonts, sound effects, and music. Cool. We can change these. Like right now it's just saying get this, get that. But these should all work for us. So I think we're good. Let's go back into our asset display.cpp and go back into, like, these could all be const as well. We can go back and change those if necessary. But this video is already taking too long. So let's go see that. You know what? Let's try. I don't know if I'm missing anything yet. Let's go back into here. I actually think we're okay. Let's see if that works. So let's try to run this. Where's our big function there? There, right here. I don't think I'm missing anything, but let's try to run it. See what happens. Okay, so we have our assets. We're not displaying anything right now. We have our fonts here, and I'm not going to want to change that name because well, let's just check to see if it even lets me do it. Okay, so it's not letting me do anything on the double click. Let's just run this so we can get the textures. Let's go to our textures. So that's being selected. So we're not able to change the name. The rename is not working, so let's see why. So on double clicked, probably this here. Are we even ever setting this anywhere? No, I am not setting that. So we can just use the ImGui is item hovered. Put that there for now. And start it. Okay, run it, stop it, check our assets, double click. Yay! So we already have, so if I go this way, see, rename text cannot be blank. And we know that this is BG Forest, so BG Forest. And it's fine because this is already BG Forest, so let's say BG Forest 1. Awesome, and the name change was done successfully. So let's change this one now. And let's try clicking on other stuff. Yeah, see, it won't let us click on anything else, and that's what I want. If I hit escape, escape will actually shut the program down. So and we don't need that anymore. We can actually go remove that. So let's get rid of that real quick. We got to make sure that everything's working accordingly. So in our application.cpp, we have it in our process events here. We don't need this anymore because we have the X and all that stuff, like the close button on the window. And eventually we'll have an exit button for the editor, where it'll be a file like this and you'll be able to exit. We'll have the same thing for our editor. So let's run it again and make sure that when we hit escape, it stops trying to change the name. And regardless of what we already have there, it should automatically just reset it back to what it was. All right. So we have our assets, and let's just go to our scene, play, stop. So we have our assets there. Rename, let's do this one, and we'll try to rename it to BG Forest. So double click. Cool. So, so it's not showing everything here. And I think I know why. So let's go, before we do that. So yeah, see our escape works. So if I go blah, 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 and go escape, cool. It's exactly what I want. So see when I'm dragging it, that's our drag drop. So that's working. Now we don't know if it's actually working yet because we haven't implemented the end source or the target. Right now we've only got the source. So we'll get to that as well. So let's close this. And we need to add something in our asset display right here. So if not rename and not selected, or not be selected asset. That should work now. Okay, play, stop, go to our assets, and we have this. And if I try to rename, And see, we still see all these, and that's what I want. So if I click on this, it doesn't do anything. So I can still drag other ones while this is renaming, so we're gonna have to block that out as well. So let's hit escape. Let's hit the collider. Cool. And so see, we put it to nothing, so it says it cannot be blank. So if I hit enter, it shouldn't work. Cool. That's exactly what I wanted to see. So yeah, right here, failed to change asset name. Well, you could put a better error there if you like. Let's go back into this. And let's say BG Forest. Bang, saying BG Forest already exists. So we don't want to change it to that. Let's say BG Forest 1 and it works. Or we could just say big red. Big red. Cool. So that's all working the way that we want. Go to our fonts. Go to our music. We haven't loaded those yet. Yeah. Cool. All right. So that's it for this episode. That is it. So we have our asset display. We're going to be able to drag and drop the stuff that we need. So say we have a UI and we want to drag our font onto it eventually, and we'll have the details properties for whatever the entity is. And you can just drag the font in. That's the goal that we're going to have there. So a little challenge for you guys, because this video is already taking too long. There's a lot of things that we covered here. And I want you guys, so when you right click, see how this little context box pops up, but it doesn't say anything. I want you to create a function that will allow us to change or do something in there. So instead of having to do the double click here, right, to get into the rename, you want to have a drop down or a context that allow you to pick like rename or delete. So that's your challenge for now, is to create a new function. So let's get out of here. And we had that here. So where was that? ImGui begin context there. So I want to have one right here, create a function called open context or open asset context, right? And the open asset context, we're going to want it to take the asset iter or the name. So asset iter takes the name of it, and we want to be able to do things to it. So what would we be able to do to this asset? We want to be able to delete the asset. And what does deleting the asset means? That means deleting it from the asset manager, okay? So we'll remove it, and you got to make sure that everything that's associated with it also gets deleted. So try that out, and what you're going to need for that is a function called ImGui selectable. So we'll just do it really fast. So I won't make the function, we'll just do it for all assets, but it'll be just like this, ImGui selectable, and then we'll just say rename, right? So if rename is pressed, we're going to want to say, so it'll be MB rename is equal to true, right? So if ImGui selectable rename MB rename equals true, right? And then you can have another one. So if ImGui selectable and have delete, and then you want to have your to do delete this asset. But this should all be done in a separate function, because we're going to want to be able to send in the type, the current selected type that we have here. So ME selected type. So I'll show you what this means right now. And right here, we can, for now, we can just test this here and go Scion log. Please delete. And then this will just be the name of the asset, and send in the asset iter. Okay. And then this rename could be true. So I basically want this same type of idea. So let's run this so you can see what I'm talking about. Okay, so let's go start, stop, asset. So right here, so if I click on this asset, so this one's it. I go, so we can rename it. Boom, it opened up our rename for us. Or if I can go to delete, bang. So it says, please delete BG4. So that's the goal I want you to do, is try to delete that from the map. So create the functionality in the asset manager to delete this asset. That's your goal, or that's your challenge for today. or for this video. You don't have to do it. I'll go over it in the next video, but that's how you learn. You try these things yourself, try to actually do the challenges on your own, make changes on your own, and see if you can get that done. There's also another one. I want you to be able to hold the control button and scroll the mouse in, scroll the mouse out, and I want these tiles to change size. You can do that in the update function. So see if you can do that as well. That's another challenge. So down here in our update function, see if you can get that to work. Okay, so that's it for this video. In the next video, I'm going to go over the challenges that I talked about today, and then we're also going to start the scene and scene management. Okay, take it easy.